My name is Dominique, and I am also known as She Wanders Earth, and I've been living on the road for over 6 years, and I'm a full-time van lifer based out of Alberta right now, but Canada in general, and I travel with my dog, Sora. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks for joining us. And I'm Trisha, your co-host on the 4x4 Canada podcast.
And I'm your other host, Wes. I am super excited about this, Dominique. We met at the BC Overland Rally a month or so ago, and I hadn't come across you before, but I started following your Instagram, and we had a couple conversations, but I love the fact traveling around the world and around North America, at least, living in a van, and that's a lot of people's dream, right? So I'm looking forward to talking to you about it. There's a lot of aspects about the van life. There's a lot of positives and there's a little bit of negatives in there. And yeah, we're going to get into it. So I want to give a shout out to last week's interview, Ben with Falcon in the Woods. And he's a Jeep Gladiator owner over on the East Coast, over in Nova Scotia. And we talked a little bit about overlanding on the East Coast and how beautiful it is. And we're talking about everything from the ocean to the beaches to the timberland, and talked a lot about the differences over there compared to over here on the West Coast. Both are equally as beautiful, and it's really neat to see the differences between the two ends of the country for sure. So shout out to Ben from Falcon in the Woods, last week's episode. This week we have Dominique, and as we mentioned, She Wanders Earth on Instagram, and a little bit of YouTube in there too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned, Dominique and I met at the BC Overland Rally about a month ago here, and she is a full-time van lifer, traveling all around North America. I got to admit, I'm jealous, and I think our listeners will be just as jealous and just as interested in your story as I am, for sure. I know that you're running the Ford Transit van, right?
Yeah, it is the 2022 Ford Transit, as long as it gets, the full extended, high roof, all-wheel drive, which is the bonus. Yeah.
What I love, and I know this is in your first van, and we'll go back to your first van, but what I really love about stalking you on Instagram was going back and checking out how you actually did a lot of the own work on converting your vans to live in. And that's a thing that a lot of people are maybe interested in, but they're scared to death of doing. And as I'm sure you probably were as well, right?
Yeah.
And you learned a lot, I assume, on it, right?
Yeah, it's been a process. I don't know if we want to dive into the first vehicle that I lived out of.
For sure.
Yeah, start from the beginning.
Might as well.
All right, so let's dive into it. My van life journey started in 2017 when a breakup happened, and as that is for many people, is like the entry into a big transition. And for me, I didn't really know who I was or where I was going. And I wanted to reevaluate like my purpose and my community and what that meant to me. And so I met a ton of new people, as you do. And the concept of minimalism and car life slowly trickled into my life. And it started with the whole concept of tiny living. So when I first learned about minimalism, it was generally associated with people who lived in tiny houses or container homes, things like that. And then I started venturing into outdoor activity as well at the same time. And this is when I learned of the concept dirtbag and people living in their cars. And at the time, I was on my way to medical school, and my degree is in molecular biology and biochemistry. So I was very much straight A's. Everything was by the book. Bed was made. Things were put away. That was how I lived. I lived a very rigid, structured lifestyle. So the concept of dirtbag and climbing and living out of a vehicle at the time was like not appealing to me at all. But when I learned about minimalism, what really attracted me to it was the fact that when you strip everything away and you only have in your life what is really important to you, the things that you do keep in your life have so much more value associated with them. And so I gave myself this chunk of time between September 2017 until when I officially made the big change in April 2018. I gave myself this timeline between September of 2017 until April of 2018, where I got rid of things very slowly. So each month I would go through my closet and I would either sell or donate, give away things that I owned to get rid of everything in my apartment. And I told myself at the time that I could only take with me whatever I could fit in my vehicle. So
Wow.
that's how it all happened. So I actually got rid of everything in my apartment until there was only what could fit in a vehicle. So that's what happened. So from that point, when I had moved everything into my car, I didn't really have anything built out. It was literally just the back seats folded down, and I drove myself to Squamish. I did drop out of university. I had one semester left to go, and I did drop out for that period of time. I quit my job as a paramedic, and I went to work for BC Parks for a summer. And I said, if I can just have these 5 months in the car, see how it goes, then I will let myself get a van.
So what did
Wow.
mom and dad say?
That's a great question. If it was, unfortunately, it was their homeless child. That was the new term for me, was their homeless child. My mom and my dad were very concerned. They were really concerned because I was this aspiring physician, this aspiring medical student with these big goals, these big ambitions. And as we'll get into it, I think that I was always trying to prove something. But anyways, so then I gave myself this summer, this 5 months in Squamish, and I had the best summer of my life. This was the transitional summer for me where I spent most of my time outdoors. I was as active as I had ever been. I met other people in the van life and car life and dirtbag community. And it was filled with like-minded people who were just out to experience life to its absolute fullest, which was, I think, the biggest risk that I had taken by transitioning into van life, was thinking, what is my life going to be like now? And have I made this huge mistake? But to see that there are other people out there that are living an alternative lifestyle and as happy as can be.
The van life lifestyle, it's amazing how huge it is, but yet how small it is.
That is a good point. That's a great point. I would say it's much bigger in the United States. Canadian van life is a little trickier because our winters are so much harsher. But you
Right.
will notice a cluster of van lifers on Vancouver Island in the wintertime with the milder climate. But we are a very tight-knit community, and we do know most of each other once you've been in the community for a while, especially when you start going to those van life and even those expo meetups. They're familiar faces all the time.
Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
you transitioned from your car or your SUV into your first van. How did that
Yes.
work out?
That was great. The first van's name was Trish. She was a white Chevy Express who had character. I bought it from two Australians that were surfers, and it was $10,000. And she carried me through, gosh, I think it was almost 2 full years that I had that van. And I raised my first puppy, Kaya, in that van, which was an experience in itself, but she'd only ever known of van life. And then during that period, I traveled all across Canada twice and all across the States, from Ontario, south across the border, all the way to LA and Malibu. And then I went up the coast and came back to Canada. That was like my first real experience of venturing outside of the comforts of Canada and the safety of Canada and doing the solo female dance across North America.
You now have your Ford Transit. You moved into
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
And going back to the fact that I love you did a lot of the modifications yourself. And probably it was a lot to do money-wise, because to outfit a van like that is have somebody pay somebody to do it is a lot of money. So how was that setting up your van? What did you learn out of it? And what would you change after you've been living in it for a while?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the reason why DIY van builds are so expensive, at least if you're a first-time DIYer and a first-time van builder, is because you're going to do everything at least twice or 3 times. So your expenses are truly double when it comes to lumber and PL Premium. PL Premium is my favorite glue. A lot of the van is held together as PL Premium in this van. Anyone who knows and has been following my build journey knows I love PL Premium. And if for those who don't know, it's a construction adhesive that does not come undone. But I think the biggest lesson that I learned, so when I ordered the van, I ordered it 5 months ahead of time before I knew I was getting it. So I had 5 months to prepare. And this essentially was like my grown-up van. So I'm turning 32 next week. And so I'm like, I run my own company. I'm 32. I want a husband and a family in this van. I wanted make this like my tiny home on wheels. I've had my surfer van. I've had my vans that are 91s and they break down and they leak oil, and this was like we're going to do it right. It's going to start every time we turn the key. So I spent quite a bit of money on I paid someone from the UK to do a full design for me of my van. So that was the first mistake. That was because the reason that was a mistake, I would say, was because I was actually this whole van is built with 80/20, which they're aluminum extrusions. And so it's like adult Lego, which is, I highly recommend 80/20 to anyone who is going to build a van. And what I would say was that when he designed the build for me, it was like everything was perfectly done to a T. But any time you're doing anything by yourself, like it would be different if I had sent that to a builder. Let's put it that way, because then they're going to take the design and they're going to put it together for you. They're going to read the design, CNC machine, maybe the pieces that are going to go on top of the 80/20 over the framing. But other than that, as a DIYer, when you're putting things together, everything's going to shift or things are going to change, or you decide you want the shower in one place, but then it needs to move over an inch. And that just became really tricky. So I ended up just scrapping his design. And I think that cost me $1,500 US to do right from the get-go without having anything. And then from there, the rest of it, I just decided to build from the floor up. So the very first thing that I did, and shout out to Far Out Ride, they have an amazing blog on their website of how to build out a van. I did a lot of my build based around how they had built out their previous vans. And the first thing just being like, you just start with the floor and then you start with insulation and you slowly build from there. So I don't know if that answers that part of the question. In terms of what I would change, I would just say probably more storage. That would really be it. But the reason that I love this van the way it is right now is because I built it exactly how I wanted it. And it did take me almost 2 years to build this van out, and it is entirely custom, but I built it exactly how I wanted it. So I have a full shower, I have an oven, I have an induction cooktop, I have my mountain bike in the back, room for my skis, 2 cupboards for clothing, my dimming lights, I have the cedar roof, the pull-out fridge, and the freezer. So I did have every aspect, like from my journey of being on the road for 6 years. You learn what you love and what you need, what you don't need. And so I've just incorporated all of that. And I know the shower is a controversial opinion among van lifers, but it's not one for me.
No, to me, I would definitely want to have a shower. And you can do the outdoor showers and you can do the Y or whatever, right? But to me, having a shower inside and having that privacy and stuff like that as well, too.
100%.
As well as it can be minus 10 degrees outside. You can still have a shower. So
exactly.
And especially as active as you are trail running, you're doing mountain biking, all that stuff. So having access to a shower is critical. So
yeah. And I think that is the difference as well. The activity level in my life, I know everyone has a different activity level. For me, I do run generally every second to every 2 to 3 days. On the weekends, it's every day. And I like to have a shower after I exercise. Yeah. And just being able to, and we'll get into this again, but with van life burnout and with living on the road, if you're exercising and you go for a hike and you come back and you're like starving, you want to go for dinner, it's not like you're pulling into your house and then going and having a shower and getting ready and going for dinner. If you don't have a shower in your van, you're like, okay, now I have to go to the rec center. Is the rec center open? Do they have showers? How much are the showers? There's a lot of other factors at play when you live an active lifestyle if you don't have the ability to just shower in your van. And again, coming back to that outdoor shower piece is you don't necessarily want to be in your bikini or swim shorts out the back of your van. If you're I'm here in Canmore right now. It's a very popular place. Yeah.
Yeah, it totally makes sense to me. I would want to shower as well, too, to be honest with you. Building out your van, like you did a lot of work on your previous van with your travels and stuff like that, and then you built the inside of this current van. What did you find that surprised you most about you as you started doing it? What was probably the biggest thing that you learned about doing these repairs and these build outs your own?
Patience. Patience is the biggest one. I think what I learned in this van, or what I was doing a lot with this, and even in previous builds, was not necessarily a quick fix, but I wanted things to just be done. I wanted to put the walls up and use the nail gun and just do it how the pros do it. Just ding, 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 and then it's in and it's up. But that's not the case. And when you rush things or you don't necessarily spend a few hours really researching the best methods or you're not using the proper tool, you rush. And sometimes for me, I rushed and I wouldn't necessarily like one tool that I waited until the very last couple of months to buy was a router. And if I had just bought the router in the beginning, things like certain lines would have been cleaner, things like that. But I think that what I learned about myself is that I tend to rush DIY projects, and I again hold myself to a very high standard, which probably comes from my medical background, so that I hold myself to this standard and I want something to look really good. So that's something I've learned about myself. And the way that I cope with that now, that I manage that, is just slowing down and being patient and realizing that, you know what, I might not get it the first time, but that's all part of learning a new skill, is that you just need to practice. And it might take you 2 or 3 times before you get it. But if you have that patience within yourself, you're going to get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And YouTube is a huge resource for any of that stuff, whether it be electrical or cabinetry or anything like that. There's a lot of great videos out there to help. And I wonder, to think myself, how did my parents learn this stuff before without YouTube? I've had YouTube help me with plumbing. I've had YouTube help me with fixing a dryer, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, how did people survive without YouTube before?
I know. YouTube University.
It is YouTube University. That's where I've learned every skill. Every skill. People ask me a lot, how did you have the courage? And I really didn't. I bought this very expensive van and I had no choice. Some people have savings to hire a builder. That's great. And honestly, I'm not kidding. It probably would have been cheaper if I just hired a builder in the beginning. But I've learned a lot of skills, but YouTube is where it's at. And there are so many videos and there's so much content out there that the other thing you'll know, or you'll notice if you decide to build a van, is that there are so many different ways to do one thing or a similar thing. So you just watch 5 or 6 videos and you decide what's the best option for me and what look am I going for, or what skill am I going for, and then you go with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to a lady I've been watching on YouTube for the last little bit, and she's been building her van, and that's Elisa from Explore RX, I believe is her YouTube. Yeah, Explore RX. And it's been really interesting. She has never done anything like this before, right? I hadn't even picked up a hammer before. And watching her progress and learn things, and she's asking the watchers questions and stuff like that, and their opinions and that, but seeing her confidence level rise as she's building the inside of this van over the last 8 months or whatever, it's been absolutely really cool. And I'm sure that's a lot of van lifers go through that as well too.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the bigger perks of doing your own van. If you have the time and the resources, is you learn everything, where everything is, how to fix everything, how everything operates. And so when something breaks or stops working, because it will, you know how to fix it. And I think that is so valuable. Yeah.
Going into, like you just said, like learning a lot, either from YouTube or just getting experience on fixing and just being on the road, especially solo. For me, okay, I know some things, but that is still a scary thing where it's, okay, do I know enough mechanical to say, if I break down or something, what am I going to do? How do you navigate that part?
That's a great question. I think that when I had older vans, I definitely had BCAA. Like there was just no question. I had the premium, and that definitely made me feel safer. I also, from the beginning, have known how to do like an oil change. But generally, if I were to ever break down, that's not necessarily, knowing how to change your oil isn't going to necessarily help you. But being able to have the roadside assistance is huge, just for peace of mind. And then I also think having a roadside safety kit, like having a battery booster, having cables, and then also having Starlink is like huge, because if you're roaming somewhere outside of self-service, which if you're going anywhere on the back roads in DC and a lot of the places in the States, you will find that you're out of self-service. So having Starlink too, or an inReach device, and having a way to ask and get help, that's definitely another peace of mind too. Yeah.
So when you're traveling in on the road, either in the States or Canada, do you stay mostly at parks, or what should I say? How do we call them? I know they're like provincial parks here, but I don't know what they call them in the States. But just watching like YouTube videos and seeing people who like congregate together and use like the same facilities and meet up sometimes and go like off-roading or go hiking together? Do you do stuff like that, or do you do more solo stuff?
Yeah, it really depends. So there's BLM land in the States and state parks. If I'm needing a reset where I know there's a shower and I want to have, let's say, a 10-minute shower or something like this, or I need to do laundry, I'll go
Mhm.
to a campground to do that. But in terms of meeting up with people, it really depends. If I'm looking for community, I would say yes. You can sneakily park close-ish to other vans and without it being too weird, but you have to just read the room because some van lifers are very much, okay, we have all this BLM land and you've chosen to park like right next to me. I came for peace and quiet. You can just see, what does it look like? Are the doors open? Is there a circle of vans to meet people? I think I don't really often just go to wherever there's other vans. Quite often I'll just go to where it's nice and quiet. And the
Mhm.
reason for that now, I think being on the road for so long, is that I do work Monday to Friday. And so I really love having that peace and quiet during the day. But it depends. There's events like Descend on Bend and there's other van life meetups where I will definitely go and have that social time with other vans. And then if I am at a campground or I am feeling social on the weekend and say I'm parked up, like we were out on some public land here in Alberta a couple of weekends ago, and there's other vans out there, and you just go by and you chat them up, and you want to talk about their
Mhm.
rig, and
Yeah.
you just read the room. Yeah,
Yeah. That's cool.
yeah.
You mentioned work, and let's quickly talk about that because obviously you have to have an income to pay for that gas to move around and eat and all that stuff, right? So you are lucky in that you can do the remote work. And I know that
Mhm.
you do have your own business now with social media and that. But how did you, before you did that, what did you do before work before that? Or has it always been that?
What was my career before social media?
Yeah.
So I was a paramedic for 5 years, and then transitioning once I let go of that career because it wasn't sustainable to remain a paramedic while living under the back of my car. And it also didn't match the lifestyle. Some people
Mhm.
live in their vans and they work a corporate job or a 9 to 5 and they manage it really well by staying in a city. But my whole transition into van life was about exploring an alternative way of living and like, how can I make money and this lifestyle in a totally different way that aligns with this minimalism and also like outdoor rec side of my personality that I didn't know existed. So that was when I transitioned into working for Parks BC. So I worked in two different campgrounds. One was out of Squamish, and then I also did one a summer in near Fernie at Kikaman Creek Provincial Park, which is you work at a provincial park. It's like the funniest thing ever. But it was so much fun meeting people and doing that. And that was the last summer I did that was in 2020. So the year of everything. And that was the summer where I transitioned and I said, okay, I'm going to use this summer. I'm going to have fun, meet people, meet other campers, van lifers, and people within this lifestyle. But also, I'm ready to step into like how I can actually make this work and not have to be parked in one place in order to go to a job, how I could work remotely. And that was where, again, YouTube came in so handy, as well as following larger accounts on Instagram and social media. Yeah. And that was where my now career has taken off. Mhm.
Yeah. So doing social media, from my understanding, we don't really have to get into too much if you don't want to, but you help others with their social media. So other
Mhm.
companies and stuff like that. Is that sort of where you're going with that?
hmm So I run my own company. So I have three different branches of income. So the one is the camper van rental, which we can talk about after.
Right.
So that's a new thing for me this year. And then I have my company, which is Social Peak, which is a digital media marketing company. And essentially, yes, I do content for destinations and tourism boards, as well as for small business and small and medium sized businesses doing either their own content creation, content strategy, or full social media management and consulting. And then from there, that's growing. There's more happening there, but more tailored towards the content creator side of things because I want to start to help other people learn how to live this lifestyle and work with short form video and this whole short form content that we're all seeing now, and in ways that other people can grow and work remotely, which kind of ties into the camper van rental and how I want to give people that experience of van life. Just everything tying together. And then another branch of my business, which is of course separate, is She Wanders Earth, which is all content creation. And that is brand collaborations. And I've just launched that new merch line. And there's all other forms of like little bits of passive income, which come from, again, YouTube, as well as affiliate links and things like that. Yeah. That's a little summary. There's a lot of moving pieces, and it probably sounds quite overwhelming as I've just blurted all of that out to someone who doesn't work in this space. But essentially, the best thing that you can do is having those multiple sources of income and those different revenue streams. Because as an entrepreneur, if you are going to start your own thing and you don't have a remote job that is secured. How do I say this? I guess I just want to say corporate. Like you don't have a remote corporate job where you can just work and live remotely and you want to start your own thing. It's important to have multiple sources of income to ensure that financial security and that financial stability for your mental health, like across the board. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Let's throw back. We've talked about Starlink a few times, and I think that's probably been a game changer for you and other van lifers.
Definitely. I don't think I could do what I do now without Starlink. At least I wouldn't be able to venture or travel as far. Yeah. Before Starlink, I was a hotspot queen. I still am hotspot queen. I have the largest TELUS data plan you can possibly have. It's outrageous. But that was the way that I could host meetings with my clients. And not that it's posturing, but essentially when you're living out of a van and you're trying to maintain a standard of living and you're consulting businesses on how to show up online, like having a stable internet connection is like really important, at least to me and how I feel about it. If I have wonky internet, I don't feel great about that. And then it also has just allowed me to travel to places like Baja and more remote places, even just being an hour or 2 hours away from the nearest cell tower and being able to be off grid is like, what a quality of life that is, to just be on a lake or by a river, because we all live down by a river, and just, and being online and you're just not parked up in a city and you can just breathe and relax and go for a trail run or go for a swim or a paddleboard. And I feel very privileged and very lucky, but I am so grateful for Starlink. It has changed the life for sure.
You mentioned trail running a couple times. I know you're heavy into trail running. I used to do a lot of trail running. I did a lot of 25 and 50K trail races. And looking at me now, you don't quite see that. I actually have been working on getting back into it because I do miss it after I hurt my back. But yeah, so trail running is something important to you. And I know for me, it was an escape quite often. Sometimes it was a social thing, going out and doing it with friends. But a lot of times, especially on my solo runs, I go out and do a 10 or a 15 or 20K solo run. And it was just a way for me to escape everything that's going on, work and relationships and all that stuff. So what I'm trying to basically ask is how trail running has helped you, and what else do you use to escape the world, for lack of better terms? And then second, following up onto that, is there is such a thing as burnout in the van life, and how do your activities help you with that?
Oh my gosh, there's so much there that I could say.
I know. Sorry.
I mean, the van itself is the escape, right? And you just turn the key and bye-bye to any situation you don't want to be in anymore. Which leads me to my favorite phrase, which is, wherever you go, there you are. And I think I love that phrase so much. I don't even know who said it originally, but it sticks with me and it hits home every time I remember it, because no matter how much we want to escape or run away in life, wherever you go, there you are. Your problems, things will follow you. And when you live in a van full time or you travel full time, whether it's backpacking, it doesn't matter. You will notice that the same social interactions, the same relationship problems, it's a mirror. It is going to follow you. And so I think that's a really huge piece of van life. I know like one of the biggest things I've learned in van life is the self-reflection part of it and the growth that comes within this lifestyle. But to answer your question about trail running, definitely it might be an escape. I think that I like to look at it more as similar to like climbing or something like that. It's like a meditative, you get into a flow state. And it's the way I like to say, I don't know how many spiritual listeners you have, but it's like moving the energy through you. So like all this stuck energy of you've got something going on in your life and it's like dancing, like you're moving it through you. And you either are thinking about it on your run or you're just not thinking about it, but you're just moving your body. And then like any form of physical exercise or activity, you're going to feel so much better afterwards. And so running has definitely helped me with that. Just maintain that regulation and that stability and that base in my mental health. I notice much different, like huge differences in my mood when I'm running versus not running, or active versus inactive. So I would say that's the big ticket there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Maybe running to escape was not probably the way to word it, but the first 2-3K always suck quite often, right? But once you get past that and you get that runner's high, and after you feel so good. And it's the same thing with people going to the gym, feel better after the gym. First 10 minutes suck, but after that, it's all good. I think it's a good a release kind of idea. But having said that, you must have hiked and been trail running in some incredible locations.
Yes. The most recent good decision and terrible decision was running in Iceland. Iceland is not a place for trail running, let's put it that way. But yeah, I would say this whole summer has been geared towards running in the Canadian Rockies, based out of Alberta. I was training for a 50-mile race, but I did sustain a knee injury, so I ended up not running that, which was a big decision to make. But the running out here is absolutely incredible. And it's just mountains on mountains and peaks on peaks. And yeah, the vastness of, I guess it just really depends on what it is that ticks your boxes when you're out there. But for me, just seeing that, the vastness of possibility. And Sora, her name is Japanese for the word sky, but the meaning behind it is like that vastness, the possibility, the adventure. And I think seeing that, even when I'm out on my runs, is just that reminder of, wow, we're so tiny and there's just so much out there for us. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to explain for a lot of people unless when you're out there, but I do totally get it for sure. So let's talk about your dogs. Let's start off with Kaya.
Okay.
Kaya was a huge part of your adventure, both in the start when you first started doing van life. And do you mind if we talk about her?
Yeah, we can. I'm going to try not to cry or choke up, but we can definitely. Depends on which questions you ask.
Basically, if you can just explain to our listeners about Kaya and how you brought her along on the start of your venture, and then eventually how she ended up moving on.
She was a Kijiji puppy. I didn't really know anything about dogs. We had family dogs growing up, but I was with a previous partner at the time, and I knew that we wanted to get a blue peeler. And something happened. I was just fixated on Kaya as a puppy, and I wanted her, and that was that. I was getting her. As soon as I got her, I realized not what a terrible mistake that was, but what amount of responsibility I had just put onto myself that I had never experienced before. So I don't bear children, and so a dog is my child, but she just became my whole world, my fur baby. She was just everything to me. And so she just went everywhere with me. So I moved her right into that Trish, that white van, and she learned how to be a van dog. And I think with solo female travel, I don't just condone anyone to get a dog just for the sake because you're a solo female traveler. But I think that the companionship is really nice during those lonelier days or the alone times. And it's also really nice to have that warning signal in the van. And when you're out hiking with wildlife, I think it's awesome to have a dog. But yeah, she was my adventure pup. I don't know. Do we want to segue into the whole journey with her? What do we want to?
It's up to you. So however you want to go with it. We can move into with Sora if you want to do that, or we can talk a bit more about Kaya, whichever you want to go, however you're comfortable.
With Kaya, it's so tricky because I think that I overlooked a lot of things when she was a puppy. I didn't think about, where I was getting her from. And I think it's a bit different when you're going with either a breeder or you're going with a rescue dog. I think I was quite unlucky with Kaya as a puppy at $400, and I got her from a redneck cattle ranch in Alberta. And she had genetic issues from the very beginning. She had weird things like an extra tooth. She had an extra dew claw. She had an umbilical hernia. And she had these really strange shakes. Like she was always shaking, like just trembling. And her front leg was always crooked and her back leg was crooked. There were just some really strange things from the beginning, but I just loved her. And there wasn't necessarily ever a conversation at that age of her life that maybe she's not a good puppy to raise. Maybe this is the time to consider putting her down. And I just loved her through all of it. And I think I had spent over I don't know, $5,000 within the first 4 months of owning her, with like hospitalizations and sicknesses and
Oh,
surgeries and the whole thing right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And again, I just looked past it. I was like, yep, we're too late for pet insurance at this point, and we're already this far in. And so
yeah.
I just raised her, and she was just an absolute lover. She was a sweet girl. She loved everyone. She remembered you when she met you. And the bond between her and I was, yeah, unmistakable. That's all right. Anyways, viewers, the listeners will understand. It was an unbreakable bond. And weird things just started to happen. So I live again a very active lifestyle, and that's why I chose a blue heeler. Was I wanted a dog that was loyal to me, was always going to know where I was, and was going to protect me, as well as have that active ability to, go mountain biking and go on these long hikes. And so from about a year, maybe just over a year, I started taking her out on longer hiking trips. And then about a year and a half in was when I started mountain biking with her. And that was when, right around that time, she actually blew both her CCLs, so like ACL equivalent in humans. And the vet told me that it's going to be a lot of money. I think it was $4,000 for the TPLO surgery on the one leg. And he wasn't sure if the other one had fully gone yet, but he knew the one had for sure gone. And I said, yeah, that's no problem. And this is back in 2021 that I first knew that this was going to start to happen. And that was when I actually sold my second van. Her name was Isla. It was a big blue. We haven't talked about that van yet, but it was a big blue fiberglass wide body van. It was the van that it was like the van, the really cool retro van. But I did sell that van because I knew, one, I couldn't afford the surgery at the time for Kaya. And I also knew that her healing was just not going to be sustainable in a van. And I was going to need to get a truck, which I then also built up the back of, and a little place to like a little apartment for her to have for a few months in between vans. And that was, again, the same time that I ordered this van that I'm in now. So I sold that van, paid for her surgery. She had the surgery. The other CCL went. I kept her and carried her through all the surgeries, but her personality after those surgeries shifted. Like something was not the same. She started to become really dog reactive. And I think it was because of her weaknesses at that point. Like she already had weaknesses, but then things started to get really bad for her. And I worked with trainers, I worked with exposure and everything to try to work through that. And I thought it was something that she would get through. But then as we started to do follow-up x-rays and follow-up visits, the vets were telling me that she was like riddled with arthritis in her whole body, that she looked like a 14-year-old blue heeler. They were like, what, she's a year and a half. This doesn't make any sense. Or maybe I guess she would have been 2.5 at that time. And then as another year went by, so at this stage, we were no longer hiking more than 5 kilometers. And you can imagine a 3-year-old at this point, blue heeler, that can't go more than 6 kilometers. They're a T-Rex breed as it is. They're just mental and neurotic. And I love them for it. But that was the hardest part. And I think that her restricted activity combined with like her pain and ongoing pain, it was just a recipe for disaster. And the weirdest part about Kaya was one of the follow-up x-rays, we learned that her spine was fusing. And they said that at some point, somehow, they don't know if it was when she was a puppy or from the farm, we don't know, that there was potentially some sort of spinal fracture and that her spine was fusing together. And so then I had her on CBD, I had her on gabapentin, I had her on Medicam, I had her on trazodone, I had her on all the things, and she was just not herself. And when I really realized that was when I was in Baja last year and she couldn't play with the dogs and she just started to scream. She was just screaming in pain all the time. She couldn't jump in and out of the van, and had just turned 4 when we got back from Baja. And unfortunately, and I don't know where the line is of where I should share this, but unfortunately, she did bite 2 people when we got back. So it was a series of decline in her health, a decline in her pain, and then a decline with people she knew.
Yeah.
And when she started to lunge at people she knew, and then she bit someone that it was at a restaurant, but we had been sitting there for a while and then just randomly bit this person. And then the really bad one was when she bit a trail runner that was running past our van. And that was when I really knew that she was not happy. And so that was a decision that I had to make, not lightly, and through a lot of consults with trainers, experts in the States. I paid thousands of dollars for trainers trying to find solutions for her. along with medication and whatnot. But yeah, she was not a happy girl by the end of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the hardest decisions anybody can make. That's your
Yeah.
child. And I feel for you on that. It's, yeah.
I hear you on that. I've been through that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Have you?
Yeah.
It's a weird one to talk about, especially online. And I actually really haven't shared that story too much online, simply because I think there's, again, controversial opinions about what to do in those situations. And I think that for me, like, I knew in my heart, I can talk about it now because it's been a year and a month, and I can finally talk about it without crying. But I can very easily say it was the absolute worst day of my life, and there's no pain that compares with putting down a loved one, like your fur baby, for sure.
Yeah.
So that decision was not made lightly, and the decision was not made for ease of my own life. I would have very easily carried her around on my back in a backpack, which I did. I carried her up the Chief on my back. If anyone knows the Chief, 45 pounds. But I would have muzzled her till the day she passed. But what made the decision for me was seeing her misery. It was like, she was not happy anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally get it. And you got to do what's best for the dog in that situation. And I feel for you. And I understand it as well, too. Yes. Having said
now we have
that,
Sora.
Yes, now we have Sora.
Who's a light. She's a light in my life. She's very spunky. She's also very spunky, but she's a lover. Yeah. And she's chewing
there
him in the background here.
Yes. She's like, oh, me. My cute, say hi.
I heard my name.
Oh, yeah.
It's all good.
No,
so
she's
Sora
great.
you've had for a while now, right?
I got her in March. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, of this year.
A few months. Yeah.
She's 7 months now.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what kind of dog is she?
She's a healer too, right? She's Australian. Is she no, she's Australian Shepherd?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another
she's
pretty
a
active
mini
dog then.
Yes. She has a really lovely personality. She doesn't have any reactivity, which I absolutely love. She is a full lover, cuddler, licker. She is so much fun. And I think that getting her was a very scary decision. I think because I wasn't sure that I would be ready for another dog again. Sounds silly, maybe, but the solo van life, when you go from being a solo female on the road with your dog to then having no dog and you're solo on the road, it's a very different experience. Not sharing, like, sounds maybe silly to people who don't have a dog that you're like sharing an experience with your dog. But like, you are truly best friends. Like, when I was with Kaya, I would be like, look, Kai. And I would like point at like cows on the road or moose or things. And she'd be like so excited to see things. Or like, we called my mom her Nana. So I'd be like, we're getting to Nana's house. And she'd be so excited. And so you just have these conversations. And yeah, you're definitely talking to your dog.
Yeah.
But when that's
100%.
not there, it's very strange. So it was scary getting Sora. I obviously have no regrets, and she's giving me that challenge again to raise her. And it does definitely feel like a second chance. There feels like a little bit of risk there, a lot of pressure, but I'm so grateful for her. Yeah.
Cute. I wanted to talk about your rental van.
Yeah, let's dive into it. What do you want to know?
So is it one of your previous vans that you had before?
No, it's not. I bought it built out, actually. So it's not one that I built. I did buy it fully done, and it is a short roof, so you can't stand up in it, but it's still awesome. And the reason for this van is this year, I had big goals of doing the Pan America Highway. I wanted to do it this year. Things didn't necessarily play out for this year. It is high on the list for next year, and we can chat about that too. But because I knew I was going to be staying in Canada this year, I needed something more in my life. And so why not just get a second van? This isn't the first time that I've owned multiple vans at the same time. So it's not something that sort of intimidated me. But the biggest reason for this, and what's really neat, was wanting to give people that experience of van life. I think a lot of people that I've talked to have been like, how do I get into van life? How do I experience it without just putting a bunch of money into a van? And there's this kind of big conversation where you can spend $10,000 and live the exact same lifestyle as someone who spends $200,000 or $300,000 on a van. You can get a similar lifestyle, but you still get the similar experience. And so giving that opportunity to people with my own rental van has been really awesome and really rewarding. And to my surprise, it is like fully booked out for the summer, which is so awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been great.
It's
That's
a
great.
mobile bee, basically, right? So,
Yeah, it truly is.
yeah.
I think a lot of people use it, I think, to trial out van life, but other people just want to have a nice camping vehicle for the weekend,
Yeah.
depending on what they're up to. But yeah, it has running water. It has a full inverter, battery, solar system. It's got extra storage on the roof and a cargo box. The bed is like a pull-out style. So like with slats and you pull it out. Yeah, room for 2 people. It has a diesel heater in it, a fridge, fully set up. Yeah.
Wow.
Perfect. So if people are interested in that, how would they look at renting that maybe in the future?
The easiest way is to go to my website, so shewandersearth.com,
Yeah.
and scroll down a little bit and you'll see a little button there for rent my camper van, but it is on Outdoorsy. So if you check on Outdoorsy and then search in Kelowna, you will find it there too. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. We've talked a little bit about being a female and traveling on your own, obviously with or without the dogs. I'm meeting more and more females that are doing this, which I think is absolutely wonderful. What advice would you give to a female that is wanting to maybe get into van life or get maybe more out exploring with even weekend trips and stuff like that? I have a friend, Terry Ann, who she explores off road on Instagram. And when she first started a couple of years ago, she had a rooftop tent in her car and then she moved into Tacoma and she's gone all over the place. She's Vancouver Island by herself. She's going to the Kootenays by herself. And watching her grow as a lady doing all this solo venturing by herself has been absolutely incredible. Watching her confidence grow, and now she can tell a bear to go screw off and stuff like that. How have you found it being a female, and is there any advice you can give some females looking to get out and explore more?
Definitely. I think starting small is key, and
Yeah.
embracing the fact that the first time or the first few times you go out, you're going to feel terrified. You're going to feel afraid. At least I sure did the first,
Oh, yeah.
especially being in my car. I was like, for some reason, I had this massive fear that I just wasn't going to wake up the next morning. I just wasn't sure if I was going to make it through the night. Totally unreasonable. We do have this fear, especially just women in general, about solo travel and this massive fear of certain things, whether that's wildlife or other people. I think for myself, there's precautions that I take that will always at least ensure my highest safety if possible. So one of those things is you never cook and hang out where you sleep. So for example, if I'm here right now and I'm cooking dinner and I have got my door open and my dog's outside, there's going to be a lot of people around wandering and they're going to see I'm alone in my van. So I finish up what I'm doing and then I go and drive to my sleeping destination. So that's like the number one is like not allowing, like you wouldn't if I slept there, then if anyone was potentially interested in knowing that I was alone in my van, they would then know I was alone in my van.
Yeah.
Another one is reading reviews of places before you go. So places to sleep. So iOverlander is an app that's so well known among all of us. So iOverlander is great because you can read recent reviews. If there's no reviews in the last year, I just don't go there. I don't sleep there because people, it's not populated enough. That kind of comes back to Trisha's question of, do you sleep in your other campers? In that regard, yes. If it's an area that I don't know, it's a city I haven't been, I'm probably going to go to the iOverlander spot. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go to the iOverlander spot that has the most reviews, and there's probably going to be a lot of other van lifers there, but it feels like that's safety in numbers. So I would definitely do that in that circumstance. Other things in Canada, I used to carry like a massive flashlight. It's just not necessary. I do have, I think it's that peace of mind thing. I've got this big flashlight. I feel really safe, but I do carry bear spray on me from trail running. So I always have that in the van. But realistically, if you're sleeping in the safe areas and you're researching ahead of time and you're just mindful about your surroundings and just being mindful about who you're talking to and what you're saying. If someone comes up to you and they're like, a lot of people are really curious about van life and they think to themselves, what a cool life. And a lot of people are 100% innocent and they just want to know about what you're doing, where you're going, because they're really genuinely interested. But unfortunately, you don't necessarily know that is the truth.
Yeah.
And so I do not share my travel plans with anyone. If someone says to me, like, how long have you been in there? Are you in there alone? I just don't answer the questions truthfully. I just don't. I will say I have a boyfriend, or I will say that I'm going to this X place, or whatever questions they're asking, I will just make up a different answer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a lot of wonderful people out there, but there's
Mhm.
some not wonderful people out there as well too. So
Yeah.
do you have some interesting stories about wildlife or people in some of your travels?
Oh, goodness. My one wildlife story would be being chased by a moose. I don't know if you saw that story
Oh my
anywhere.
did.
God.
That was the scariest encounter I've ever had. That was with Kaya. We were in Fernie, and this comes back to like solo travel and being like, oh, I'm in this new place. I'm going to go explore without really knowing about the area, how wild it is, or anything with travel. You're always learning in these new experiences. And one of the things that I learned quite quickly is that in Fernie, the moose population is quite substantial, and June is calving season. And calving season is one of the most dangerous times to be wandering around in the woods, let alone with a dog, because of the scent. So a moose had just calved in this trail that I was recommended to go on. And this is before my time of carrying bear spray on my chest. Like I have now a running vest and I carry bear spray in the front, which is I highly recommend carrying bear
Yep.
spray on the front of your chest. And so I was charged by a moose and I had bear spray in the back of my backpack. And I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to restart this story. Excuse me. I'm in a meeting. Yeah. No, you may not ask me a question. This is a prime example. This is a prime example.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm sorry.
You can continue
That
on.
was, yeah,
Good
okay,
night.
great. That was a man insisting on asking me a question. Yeah, that
Interesting.
happens.
Yeah.
That happens a lot, and then you just have to be quite firm.
Yeah.
with that.
It's all good. But that's a perfect example, right?
Perfect example.
No, you may not ask me a question. Yeah, that's a perfect example of that. Okay, we're gonna go back to the moose story.
Yeah, continue on with
Uh,
moose.
I don't know where to
I don't know where
probably
you
start off
ended
with.
now, to be honest with
I
you.
know
You're talking about
something
the
with
bear spray, and it
June.
was in your
Yeah.
backpack.
Okay.
Yeah.
I highly recommend that people travel with bear spray on their chest, and this was an example of why that was necessary. Was I had the bear spray in my backpack at the time, so I was just walking Kaya, and we were going through this old growth cedar forest, and it was just beautiful. And a moose had just calved, but I didn't know this, so I had just whipped out my phone and I was looking at this beautiful old growth cedar tree, and I started to record this tree. And at the same time, I hear this because can't even explain the sound that came out of this moose. And I turned around, and there was this full cow moose charging me. And I do have the clip of this, but it was because I had just pulled out my phone to record the tree. And all I had time to do was scream and jump to my side. And the moose just stomped, did that, the block charge, stomped, and then turned around and ran away. And I remember seeing it running away. And thankfully, I had Kaya on leash at the time. So
Yeah.
I dropped the leash, but she didn't run off. And then I just saw this like cute little face. Anyways, I survived. And I think a lot of people that I've told this story to have been like, how did you survive this? Like, how did the moose not just trample you or
Yeah.
Kaya at this
Yeah.
time? And I think the ways to avoid a situation like that is, again, don't go into an area where the population of moose are calving, and also just carrying bear spray. And I don't know to what effect bear spray would have on a moose that is charging you like that. I think, but just even having the awareness of my surroundings that there could be moose in the forest would be a big one.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. About a month ago, I did an interview with Wild Safe BC, and they have a main focus on bears, but we also talked about other animals as well. But what you just mentioned about having a bear spray on the front on your harness or whatever you want to call it, she mentioned that probably 3-4 times in that interview, that have it easily accessible, because you may not have the time to drop your pack and pull out your bear spray. And so she said same thing, keep it on the front, and so it's easily accessible. And then the other thing too that she mentioned with a lot of the wildlife is make yourself as big as possible, with whether it be a bear or a cougar or whatever. And don't run was the other big thing, because most of these animals can outrun you so much faster. And then the other thing too that I found really surprising is that it was, I can't remember the exact spec on it, but it's something like 70% of interactions with bears involve dogs. And so they say that keep your a dog on a leash at all times, which, I mean, we're all guilty of not doing that. We want to let the dog run free and stuff like that. But it was something like 60 or 70% of interactions with bears happen with dogs.
Yeah, I learned that on my drive to Tuktoyaktuk last year, because I was driving and I had a foster dog at the time before Sora. And I had him on leash, and I had him on leash probably only because he was a foster. I've always had my dogs off leash. And on the Dempster Highway is what links Dawson City to Tuktoyaktuk, for anyone listening. And whenever anyone is pulled over on the side of the road, you always pull over and you stop and check in and make sure they're okay. And I had let him out for a pee break, and this truck driver pulled up and he said, "Are you guys all good?" And I said, "Yep." And he said, "Just so you know, like, you should be keeping that dog inside your van because you will pull a bear out of the bush with that dog." And that was the first time I had really heard about that. And then I started to talk to locals, and it's true with the grizzlies, especially. And I don't know how much this translates to black bears. I definitely experienced that with the moose, that's for sure. But with the grizzlies, especially, is like an absolute, if you're in grizzly territory, like dog on leash, it is so not worth it.
A lot of our guests use this question, but especially you, because you've been to a lot of places. Where is probably your, I guess, favorite place you've been to? And where would your dream place to either travel to or go with your van?
That's a great question. I think I'm split between two places for a favorite. One, of course, number one is Baja. Who doesn't love Baja? That is like top of the list, incredible for van life. You're just camping on beaches, and your Starlink works perfectly because there's no trees. I mean, it's a dream. It's an absolute dream. It's a paradise in Baja, and you get to connect with the locals and a different culture. And I think that is one of the highlights of my life to date, for sure. And the other, I would say, is the Yukon in Alaska. I think just with the wilderness, the vastness, and the tundra alone up there is just so stunning. And I think that how, especially in the indigenous communities up there, and also not, and just how people live their life in such a remote and wild way, and the ways that they manage with different drinking water qualities, and their resources are just totally different with their food. Yeah, that would be the top two. Dream place is definitely the Pan America. It is on the list for 2025. I went to Tuk last fall, so I'm trying to decide, am I still allowed to say that I'm here and not
You
go
bet.
south?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like Josh and Vanessa said a month ago when we interviewed them. They did from BC down, and this next year they're going to go from BC up. So you can do it in however many times it takes you to make it work.
To link it up. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Yeah. So the Pan America for 2025.
That is an awesome goal. It's one of my goals now too, but it's probably going to be a year or two past that. But just the whole fact of you're going through so many different countries and so many people and taking your time to do it, and it just the different food, the different beaches, the Inca rooms, all the different things.
That would be my other piece of advice that sort of segues into something else I would say to anyone that's listening who's not necessarily a van lifer who wants to be, or even current van lifers probably also need to remember this advice, is that you can't see it all. Like, as much as we want to see it all, you have to accept that, like, we can't see it all. And accepting that and then moving on to the next spot is like going to be really beneficial as well to avoid that burnout.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's going to be in a 10-year trip. So
yes. So when I was talking with Sloan, she's planning on, I think she said 3 to 5 years of being down in that area. And I'm like, okay, amazing. I'm thinking about a year to do it. Coming back to what you're saying, Wes, like in preparation for it, I'm in that stage of, do I go in this van? Do I get a truck? What do I do? So I'm not too sure yet.
But there's lots of people doing it in vans, right? 4-wheel drive would be nicer. It all depends where you want to go with it, right? But most of the Pan American is a good gravel road or paved in reality.
Exactly.
So it just depends on how far you want to get away from that, right?
Exactly. That's a really good point too.
Yeah.
Probably not that far off the beaten path as a solo female, but
yeah, for sure. Definitely. I had a thought and then it left and it's not come back yet. It's pretty much covered. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask. Earlier off air, you and I were talking about a little trip you just got back from Iceland. How was that?
It was so amazing. It was, I think, like I was saying to you earlier, for this year, I have decided that I want to incorporate different forms of travel into my life. And so different types of experiences to allow myself to fill my travel cup. A lot of that comes from a place of wanting to be able to have a long-term partner because I am solo female van life. And I think that this lifestyle is not for everybody. So being open to new ways of travel that are maybe more compatible, but also just for myself too, and having new experiences, doing some backpacking, doing some international travel, camping, more things like that. And then one of those things was Iceland. So that was like my first taste of international travel outside of Mexico and the States in over 10 years. So that was a huge experience for me. And it was so much fun. Very wild and vast landscape as well. Very unpredictable weather. You're going to get sun, rain, and wind every 10-minute rotating. You never really know what you're going to get.
Yep.
When I saw people going there with expedition gear, I was like, I'm a hiker. I'm a trail runner in the Rockies. I know what gear to carry in the rain. And I actually, before I went, was not convinced to bring rain pants. I was like, I really don't need to bring this. Like, I will be running for 4 hours and then I'll warm up in that car afterward. Oh my gosh. I did bring rain pants, thank goodness, but it is full on rain and expedition. And if you want to be up close to the waterfalls, you are just going to get soaked and you just have to embrace the fact that you are going to be wet and definitely bring your rain gear. Yeah, that I don't know if we've got time for it, but that little story about that trail run that I mentioned in Iceland, somewhere in this podcast, when I first got to Iceland, my goal for the 7 days was to do as many trail runs as possible. I did 2 in the first 2 days, and that was it. So the first one, I could just tell listeners, if you're wanting to go to Iceland, the ring road is paved, and there's some little paved roads along the ring road, but the rest are called F roads, and so they're all off-roading. For any 4x4 Canada people, this is your place to go. Rent your 4x4 rig and have a blast, because when they say there's river crossings, they're river crossings. And you're not allowed to take your rental cars unless you have a designated F-road 4x4 on these roads. So we had a camper van that was not designated, and it was a point A to B trail run. And Google Maps will tell you, like, yeah, you can drive this road, go right ahead. It does not tell you that it's an F-road unless you zoom really closely into it. And so I said to my girlfriend, Kelsey, and she's not a 4x4, she's not off-road. She lives in Calgary, but she's a hiker. And I said to her, I'm going to do this 24K. It's going to take me about 4 hours through this few mountain passes. Meet me on the other side. And it's midnight sun time. So I'm starting at 5 p.m. because it's going to be light out and it's no problem. So I get to the other side at about 9:30-ish p.m. Normal people in Iceland that are there probably going to bed at that time, even though I'm wily Canadian that's just landed in Iceland and I'm stoked on the midnight sun. And I get to the other side and I'm looking around and I'm like, where's the road? Like, where's the road out? And I've just ran 25 kilometers into the middle of Iceland. And so I come across this mountain pass and I'm looking around for people and I find this Icelandic family they're fully set up. They've got their 4x4 Mercedes. I want to say it was a Land Cruiser, but I know that's wrong. A big Mercedes 4x4, whatever that might be. And they've got their tent set up and they have wife and husband and son. And I think they were older. They weren't like young and partying or anything like that. But I said to him, I know he's pointing out to me where the road is. And he says, it's just across that bush there. And he's like, there's a couple river crossings. And I was like, what do you mean a couple river crossings? Like, how far is the main road where normal cars can drive? And he was like, about 25 kilometers out. And I was like, there's no cell, like there was cell service, but at this point I had my InReach because that was a smart move, but my phone had died because I was taking too many photos of the Icelandic landscape. So I had no way of texting my friend to let her know that there was no way she was getting in. And I figured that as soon as she got to the first river crossing, she would probably have figured that out. Anyways, I begged and pleaded to this Icelandic man, please drive me the 25 kilometers out. And he did, which I still have to send him a package from Canada. I'm going to get him maple syrup and smoked salmon and the whole works as a thank you. But yeah, he drove me across and you couldn't walk these rivers. Like they were, I don't know what rivers in BC we could compare these to, but they were shallow, like up to the windows. But I kid you not, like he's just navigating through these rivers and he's going like left and right and we're floating sideways. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm either going to drown, I'm going to be kidnapped by an Icelandic man, I'm going to drown in one of these rivers, or I'm never going to see Kelsey again. It's my first night in Iceland, and what have I done? So if you're a trail runner, Iceland is maybe be a little more prepared with you're getting out. But anyways, that's the story. So I made it out. I found Kelsey before the first river crossing, and yeah.
That is
I mean,
great.
yeah, that's beautiful for sure.
Yeah, definitely. We have a friend of ours, Ryan, who we've interviewed a little while ago, and he was going to Iceland about 2 weeks after we interviewed him, and that's Adventure Dog Overland on Instagram. And he rented a little chimney with a rooftop tent, and he's been posting some pictures and videos and that. So if our listeners are interested in renting one of those little vehicles, definitely reach out to Adventure Dog Overland. He can give you some of the ins and outs and about how he rented his vehicle and his experiences. I'm really looking forward to seeing more video and that from you, photos and videos of the trips. So
definitely more is coming out right away.
I'm sure.
I definitely have some recommendations of things not to do if you're an adventurer. Yeah, it makes Canada look pretty mild. Let's put it that way.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely on my list for sure. So the problem is I have so many things on my list and I only have so many years and so much money, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Trisha, do you want to ask the last question?
Sure. So what guests would you like to hear on the 4x4 Canada podcast?
If I get to nominate someone, I would say Bound for Nowhere, Mac and Owen. They're a couple that I've been following, and I've passed them a few times in Baja, and they have a four-wheel camper and truck, and they're doing the Pan America Highway as well. And I actually ran into them here in Canmore. They were doing the same hike as me. They were doing Mount Smutwood Mountain or Mount Smutwood, either way. And we were coming down, and I was actually with Sloan. And I remember I didn't even recognize them at first. And they had all this camera gear on them. And I said, "What are you guys doing out here?" And they're like, "Oh, we're documentarians." And then once I realized they were Bound for Nowhere, I'm like, that is the perfect title. Instead of calling yourself a content creator or a YouTuber, or call yourself a documentarian. And from that point, I'll remember them forever. But they're a really lovely couple. And I think that they have an amazing story to share.
I agree 100% with you on those guys, and definitely want to get a hold of them before they make their big trip down south for sure. Once again, we were talking with Dominique. She's known as She Wanders Earth on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and shewandersearth.com. And I really want to thank you for taking the time. I know you got a busy schedule. You go between your work and your traveling and dog sitting and everything else going on. You're a busy lady, and really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us tonight.
Oh, thank you so much, Wes and Trisha. It's been so amazing talking with both of you, and thank you for having me. It's been good to share part of the wild journey and the story. And if anyone has questions, feel free to reach out. I am an open book, and I share my whole life online. So yeah, let me know.
Definitely worth checking her out on Instagram as She Wanders Earth, and she's got a lot of great videos and a lot of great photos and stuff like that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the Iceland stuff as well too. So
amazing. Thank you both so much.
And